Is the dysfunction in the legislature the result of the way the legislature is put together and systemic, or is it because of personalities, in your view?
I think some of it is personality. I think some of it is, well, I mean, people want to impose their own beliefs on others.
And don't want to compromise.
And don't want to compromise. And I think the whole purpose of there being two parties and two in a Senate and a House is compromise. And quite frankly, we simply just have not done a real good job of that.
Is that getting worse? I mean, are you seeing people becoming less willing to compromise?
I would say this year is probably the worst I've seen in the 7 years that I've been down there. And I think if you look at the fact that we passed the least number of bills in history, that would definitely speak to it as well.
That's discouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that from my perspective, it's getting more and more that way basically because of term limits. I mean, you know what clock everybody's on, right? So if I know that your clock ends next year and my clock ends 3 years from now, I don't have the same incentive to work with you to negotiate. And I'm, you know, this is obviously we get along very well, but you know, and by the same token, the people behind me know what my clock is, and so we've lost the imperative to try to work things out because now we just wait things out.
The other problem with term limits is always it reduces the sort of moral incentive to compromise because you're only down there for 8 years or whatever. You think, I only have a set amount of time to get something done. Why agree to anything? Right. I think that's always been a challenge.
And you as an individual don't have as much time to see incremental change, right? I mean, when you look at how major things have changed in our society throughout the history of our country, it's been incrementally. But when you only have 8 years to be down there, you're impatient and you don't want that incremental change. You want big change and you want it now. And I know that you're going to be gone and you don't like what I want to do, but I'm going to do it when you're gone. And so I don't compromise. I mean, that's basically what we're starting to see from both chambers all over the state.
So would you scrap term limits or just have it longer? No term limits at all?
I think if you go back to the history of the original Constitution, they debated term limits and rejected them. I think that getting rid of term limits would probably be the best thing. Now, I also understand that the voters put term limits in back in the 90s, and they're probably not ready to just reject them. So,
well, and let's be fair, Bob Griffin was there for a long, long time and got into trouble. So not having term limits isn't the complete panacea either. So.
Well, but... So if I could just say this is the system I think would be great, it would be no term limits but limits on leadership. Because when you consolidate power in one or two individuals for a long time, that's when people start to get corrupt, right? I mean, Griffin was speaker for 16 years. So if you maybe said, okay, you can't be speaker for more than 5 or 6 years, then someone else gets to be speaker, then you don't hold on to that power.
But John Deal had problems on the House side. I mean, so that's not. It doesn't seem like the complete solution either, Gail.
No, but I think the other thing you lose that institutional knowledge. Something that, as Senator Silvey said, you just wait it out. So we pass a bill in 2010, and then we come back and change it, you know, in 2016. You don't necessarily understand the rationale for what happened and why that bill was passed that way. And unfortunately, what happens is the lobbyists have more experience down there than the legislators. And I will say, since, you know, I've only served in the House so far, by the time I got to the point where I really thought I understood how you actually get something passed and get it across the finish line, I'm done next year.
You know, she raises a great point, too, about the institutional knowledge, because we rewrote the school formula in 2005. I'm one of the few people in the legislature who was here in 2005 that helped rewrite that formula. So to me, full funding of the formula was a personal thing. I felt like that's a commitment that we made back in 2005. Right. Most of my colleagues who didn't want to fully fund the formula weren't there in 2005 and didn't feel that personal connection. They didn't cast that vote to write the formula. So losing that institutional knowledge creates other issues down the road as well.
Yeah.
Now, you both mentioned ethics reform, and this seems like this should be doable, at least on some level, and everyone talks a good game about this, and Governor Greitens started off the session saying that this was a priority for him, and then a lot of legislators correctly pointed out that the governor was relying on dark money, not revealing sources of who funded his inauguration, who's paying for other things. Did legislators use that as just kind of an escape hatch so that they didn't have to deal with ethics reform? Did they say, well, the governor's not playing by these rules, why should we make it so that we have to play by these rules?
You know, I don't know if it would be fair to say that it was a scapegoat for legislators. I mean, we passed a ban last year or the year before. I mean, I've voted for a ban in the past, so to me, that's not the issue.
On lobbyist gifts.
On lobbyist gifts,
Right.
yeah, banning lobbyist
Which seems
gifts.
like a baby step, to be honest.
Right. No, that's
And
true.
it is.
Fair enough.
That's
Fair enough.
just a start.
Sure, fair enough. But that's the one that everybody wants to talk about all the
Right,
time,
right,
right?
right.
So, you know, we've done that before. We've pushed that through. It's just never gotten across the finish line. But now we find ourselves with this whole new. I mean, the dark money thing is really just kind of sprung up in the last couple of years. I mean, as far as to the degree that it is, and being focused on individuals as opposed to issues. So now we're in a situation where those of us that really think that's a problem don't want to concede the issue of ethics reform by passing a small bill, and then everybody goes, oh, well, we
It's
passed
done.
ethics reform,
It's
so we don't
done.
need to talk about that anymore.
Not real ethics.
Meanwhile, we have this massive issue over here that nobody wants to talk about anymore.
You know, we should define dark money. It's contributions anonymously to 501c4 nonprofits, right, Gail?
Right.
And we don't know who's buying that influence. It's secret from everyone in the public. I wrote about this first in 2006, I think. It's really a problem in Missouri, isn't it?
And I think it's a growing problem, as we've seen, particularly with the governor. And, you know, that has far greater influence than whether or not a lobbyist gives you a ticket to a concert or buys you a dinner. When you are receiving thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, secretly, and no one knows where it's coming from, that's a much bigger problem than these small gifts.
Yeah,
There's
well,
a much more difficult problem to solve, right, Ryan? I mean,
right. I mean,
the entrenched interests are really interested in this dark money.
right, and the groups always portray themselves as these grassroots organizations that are, you know, this is what the people are, but we don't know who the people are, you know, who the people are that funding it. I mean, we had, you know, Senator Schaaf was attacked this year. His cell phone was put on the internet, and it was a group that we don't know who funds them,
Right.
because it's all
But
dark
linked to
money.
Governor Greitens.
Linked to Governor Greitens, but we don't know who funds them.
Yeah.
You know, and so when that group comes back and says, "Oh, we represent thousands of Missourians and their views," but who's paying for it?
Yeah.
You know, and that's a problem.